Hello, real estate investing fools. Got a fun one for you today. Right now, we are all wondering what back to the office is really going to look like. Many companies are planning for a September re-entry, but I think a lot of us aren't quite sure what that's all going to mean. So my guest today is Patrick O'Neill, who's the president of Connected Buildings at mCloud. mCloud is an asset management platform. It combines artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and the cloud to make sure assets operate at peak performance. And right now, that means they have a lot of things to consider. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Deidre.
Well, let's talk first about air quality, because I feel like that is the biggest concern right now with people coming back to work. I keep hearing this term IAQ. I mean, I really hadn't heard that one before. I know about HVAC, of course. We've talked a lot about that. But what are you and your team focused on when it comes to both HVAC and IAQ?
So IAQ, indoor air quality, it's sort of a funny little fact that the HVAC system, one of its primary functions is to provide good, safe indoor air quality for the occupied spaces in a building. And what has happened, over the decades and years is that function of the system has sort of gotten buried. And what most people think about for HVAC, what do you think about, right? Comfort. It's gonna cool or heat the space to make me comfortable. Well, that's only a part of what it is supposed to do. It is also supposed to provide fresh outdoor air into the occupied spaces to dilute pollutants that are in there. And so even if there's no pollutants in there other than people, outside of people, the people themselves generate pollutants in the form of carbon dioxide, right? So the system at a minimum has to remove the carbon dioxide. But it's much more complicated than that. And, the furnishings, the equipment in the facility, off gases and things like volatile organic compounds. So there's pollution there. And of course, there are these nasty little pathogens that we're all way more familiar with after the last year than we ever were. So it's always been there as a function, but it hasn't gotten the attention, I would say, that it should. And so where sort of mCloud comes into the picture here is we have from the very start operated the HVAC system with a mind towards the indoor air quality. So really the dance you want to perfect, if you will, is you want to provide good, safe indoor air quality with the minimum energy consequences. And so by that I mean is one way to get good indoor air quality is open up every window and door, turn the outdoor air dampers on the HVAC system to full open and just blow as much outdoor air as you can into the space. Problem is that is incredibly expensive to because you still have that comfort part that I talked about a little while ago. You still have to cool and heat the space. So you want to provide safe indoor air at the minimum energy penalty. So there's a lot of things you can do to perfect that dance, if you will.
Interesting. So another concern, I think, for people is touchless entry or touchless everything. Nobody seems to know what they should and shouldn't be touching right now. Is that something that you're focused on too?
Part of what makes surfaces less safe, right, are things that fall out of the air onto those surfaces, pathogens, bacteria, virus, mold, spores. So our role really is to get as much of that out of the air as you can, so that we don't as a company, our services don't really control what the people do within the spaces, but we can minimize the environment's interaction with surfaces, to minimize what precipitates out of the air, falls out of the air onto those surfaces.
So a lot of companies are starting to do hotel desking, hot desking. It seems like there's going to be less, one person in one area. Does that also have an impact on air quality and how we think about monitoring that?
Absolutely. A lot of these, spaces or their offices or their cubicles with fairly high walls, well, they're kind of dead air, right? Dead air spaces. So you don't really want to walk in there right after someone else has left. There are several things you can do. Certainly there's the cleaning of the space, and I'm assuming that's a given. Most of these companies will have the janitorial services come in and wipe down all the surfaces. Well, the other aspect of making that space safe is to look at the airflow And is that space getting direct ventilation air from the HVAC system, or is it being bypassed? So there's really another aspect to what a responsible approach to indoor air quality is, which is to look at how is the air being distributed throughout the occupied areas. There are sort of edge case examples where you might have a supply and a return air diffuser up in the ceiling that are fairly close to each other. See my hands here. And what happens then is the air from the supply just short circuits right over to the return, and it doesn't get into the space to remove the contaminants and so on. This happens a lot with, you got tenant improvements, changes have been made. There's 5 different tenants that have been here since the building was first designed and laid out. It may have had a great air distribution strategy for the initial layout with the initial offices and where the walls were and so on. But over time, that has changed. So it's created areas that get little. I mean, we've all been in stuffy conference rooms, right? What that means is it's not getting enough ventilation air, plain and simple, for the people who are in there. And so a part of what you need to do to really get a building ready post-COVID, and really it should have been done all along, honestly, because there's colds and flus, just seasonal virus, all sorts of stuff that we've sort of accepted as normal, that will also benefit from this same strategy, which is to take a step back, look at the system, look at how the air is being distributed. There are service companies that can come out there and do things like air balancing to make sure that the zones are properly pressurized relative to one another, make sure that the supply and air diffusers are not short-circuiting. So there are services you can employ that you ought to do in order to facilitate that hoteling. Just make sure that you're doing all you can with the ventilation system, just distributing the air. And then there's another tier of things you can do, which is to purify the air. And there are some really great technologies that will help take contaminants out of the air, take pathogens like the virus and bacteria and spores and mold that have very little energy impact, but very effective at removing contaminants.
Okay, I'm going to ask you the question I think everyone wants to know, but doesn't necessarily want to ask, which is, what about the bathrooms? How is that getting changed post-COVID? Because I think there are concerns.
From an air perspective, bathrooms probably have more going for them than other spaces because they tend to have been ventilated with the idea of removing, odors and contaminants. So I actually feel a little safer, if you will, or more comfortable in a bathroom because they usually have a very strong ventilation fan up in the ceiling that's pulling a lot of air, in and through the space. So it's getting rid of anything that is in there more so than like a conference room. First thing that I do, I'm a bit of an expert on HVAC systems and so on. So I'll look and see, okay, where's the ventilation, and I'll try to sort of sit myself in a spot that gets me some fresh air if possible.
Probably one of the hazards of the job, I suppose, is you're very
Yes, exactly. I know too much, I guess, is the problem.
So what are you seeing from clients in terms of their workers demanding reassurance that the workspaces are safe? And is there a way that property managers can kind of help workers feel more comfortable as we all go back to the office?
There absolutely are, but I think there's an interesting split in perspective. I just saw a survey done by globestreet.com where they interviewed a bunch of tenants and a bunch of landlord property managers about what impact COVID's going to have on the built environment, the workspace. And what was interesting to me is 70% of the tenants, people in the spaces said absolutely it's going to have a big impact. Things are going to be different. However, 70% of the property managers and owners said there won't be any difference post COVID. There won't be any significant long-term changes as a result of it. Is maybe a more accurate way to state it. So I think that's got to play out, right? Where is the power there is the question. And are the occupants going to really mandate in terms of I'm not coming back until you convince me that you've done the right things, or are not? I think that's what's going to make the 70% of the property managers who think nothing's going to change. That's going to change that number, right? Based on the pressure they're getting from their customers. So I don't know how that's going to play out. I don't know. I mean, I've got my own view. I'd love to see it, a widespread change. I think that's the $64,000 question.
Well, you mentioned comfort earlier. It's already looks like it's going to be a hot summer. So It feels like to me, air conditioning gets pressed into use earlier and earlier. We're seeing, Seattle didn't used to have a lot of air conditioning. Now they do. Are you finding companies that are worried about cooling costs, and are there ways to be smarter about it?
Absolutely. In parallel with that, right, or in parallel with starting earlier, it seems like, and going later, is increasing costs of energy as well, right? So it's like a double whammy. We're starting earlier and it's costing us more. So they're all interested in what can we do. And there are some really tried and true ways to approach it in terms of using free cooling, what's called free cooling, or economizing from using outdoor air to when it's cool enough outside to use that to help cool the building or pre-cool the building. So there's really some tried and true approaches there. We recommend and we provide as a part of our monitoring service a spring and a fall checkout. So the other issue you get, right, is when you get a heat wave and everything comes on, half the systems don't work the way they're supposed to. So there's a mad scramble. All the contractors in the area are unavailable because everyone else is suffering through the same problem. So we encourage our customers to go through that spring and fall checkout with us to just make sure everything's cooling proper and heating properly. The other thing that we do is layer in an advanced AI. Technology can take things to the next level. So a good example of that is a building that may have a lot of HVAC systems cooling, the different spaces. You can operate it so that you maintain the comfort of the occupants, but you don't have every system cooling at the same time. So you're not what's called reaching a new peak demand for that building. And that peak demand has a very significant energy cost associated with it. So if you're smart in how you stage the operation of the equipment, you can also reduce your utility bill by 20, 30%, depending on your situation, without doing much different other than just intelligently turning things on and off.
Interesting. Do you feel like eventually there'll be more of a way to pinpoint sort of where individuals are and kind of provide, because in a building, not everybody's everywhere at one time. It seems like we just throw on the AC and freeze out a whole building. Is there ways to sort of have more pinpoint control?
Absolutely. That's a great idea. You want to come and work for us? Because I think that is part of sort of the logical progression of sensing of, the IoT movement that we have. Sensors are getting cheaper and cheaper. So absolutely, you can put occupancy sensors in places that you normally never did because they were more expensive, and really dial down what you're doing for heating and cooling if there's nobody there, just automatically. There's nobody in the space. And you can also combine that with intelligence that knows, typically during this time of the day, there's nobody here or there's rarely anybody here. So we're going to take the chance and, raise the cooling set point if it's summer or lower the heating set point if it's winter. And just kind of sneak a little savings here, a little savings there. Once you start putting it all together, it adds up.
Well, I feel like we have that in terms of lights. Lights turn off when people leave a room, but it doesn't seem like the HVAC adjusts.
Absolutely. You're spot on. Exactly. That's one of the next, I think, areas of innovation is what we just talked about.
Well, let's talk a little bit about retail real estate, because you've got some retail clients. It seems like that must be even more challenging from an air quality perspective.
It is. And we're helping them certainly on the energy side of things. But one of the things that they're very keen on is implementing indoor air quality improvement measures within their facility. Things like advanced purification, hospital level air purification is very affordable, but it doesn't do them any good. Well, it does do them good because they can tell their employees. But the idea is combine that with a communication strategy that your customers know about it and your employees certainly know about it. So we have a indoor air quality badging offer that you can put it in the front window and they can scan the QR code and see what that business is doing to improve their indoor air quality. And we have found, and our customers have found, that brings more people into that business, whether it's a restaurant or retail, knowing that they've done more than the building or the retail next door or the restaurant next door is improving the revenue. That's bringing new people into the facility.
Interesting, because I know that Airbnb has come up with a system to sort of verify to guests that a place has been cleaned. Are we going to see that sort of thing in retail as well in terms of the companies like marketing what they're doing as far as air quality or something like that?
I think so. It's a smart thing to do, right? If I mean, you want to do it just to keep your employees safe and, reduce sick time and just give them confidence to come in. Why wouldn't you advertise that fact to your customers, right? It would make them more comfortable coming into the store or to the restaurant. I don't know what's the chicken or egg, but certainly you want to take advantage of both the benefits to your employees and the improvement in revenue and customer engagement that you would get from doing that.
Is this also something that's happening on the multifamily side? Because I know there's like a well building certification. There are things like that. Is that also a factor that tenants are looking for this?
I think so. That's a little different market than we're in. What I see there is a lot of portable filtration units that get put in the different units. We do get involved in some of the common areas where they may have rec rooms or workout facilities or that's looks like a commercial building to us. So we can do the same sorts of things there that we would do in a retail environment or an office to cover those. And then getting into the individual units is sort of another strategy, another technology.
Makes sense. All right, last question for you. I've been talking to a lot of developers about retrofitting. We're starting to see state and local requirements for energy efficiency. Is that something that you touch on as well?
Yes, absolutely. We usually push well beyond what the local codes and standards are for efficiency. It takes time for new codes and standards to be developed. Usually they're consensus standards, so the industry as a whole weighs in on it. So it usually takes a few years, but I expect that we will see, sort of parallel standards for indoor air quality that really are missing and long overdue, that really up the game of the industry and bring that aspect of why the HVAC systems are there in the first place, kind of front and center. So I do see a lot of activity. Certainly some of it will happen at the state level. There's states like New York, which have mandated certain indoor air quality measures, ultraviolet light and filtration and so on. There will be others that do that at a state level, but I think also there will be a national standard that comes out of organizations like ASHRAE to really make it easy for more and more states and jurisdictions to adopt it.
Can you explain the acronym you just gave?
I'm sorry, ASHRAE is the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers. And they are the ones who are really the standards-making body for building energy efficiency, commercial building and residential, but for energy efficiency for buildings. And I think will be a major player in the emerging indoor air quality standards and updates that take place there.
Interesting. Well, thank you for your time today. This was just fascinating for me. Viewers, you can learn more about mCloud services at mcloudcorp.com. Stay well and stay invested.
Thank you very much.